Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. Today on the couch, I'm so excited to welcome author Kai Cheng Thom to talk about her new book, Falling Back in Love with Being Human, Letters to Lost Souls. Falling Back in Love with Being Human is a beautiful collection that asks what happens when we imagine loving the people and the parts of ourselves that we do not believe are worthy of love. Now, in this episode, Kai and I had quite the intimate and thought-provoking conversation, and we covered so many things, from her inspiration to write this book, to talking about some of the letters you'll find in this collection, to how we can have faith in humanity and find some understanding and compassion for ourselves and others. Plus, Kai also shares some great book recommendations that you can add to your reading list. But before we get into the episode, please take a quick second and leave the podcast a 5-star rating and review, because it's a great way to show your support. It opens up new opportunities for the show, it helps us find new listeners, and it keeps me and the podcast going. So thanks in advance, and now on to the episode with author Kai Cheng Thom. Hi readers, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me is an award-winning writer, performance artist, and community healer. But she's here on the couch with me to talk about her new book, Falling Back in Love with Being Human, Letters to Lost Souls. Please welcome to the couch, Kai Cheng Thom. Hi, Kai.
Hello, Victoria. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you here. Can't wait to talk about your book, but it's pub day. It's another baby of yours out there in the world. How are you feeling? How excited are you about this book?
I'm extremely excited. I'm also quite nervous. Every time I've put a book out, there's been this really, really wonderful and also slightly scared kind of feeling. And it's all part of the fun, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's all part of the fun. I absolutely adored this book, but I want readers to hear it straight from you. Tell us about falling back in love with being human and what they can expect when they pick up a copy.
So this is a book of love letters that I have written to people, places, and things that I find really difficult to love. Some of those people are myself, and some of them are individuals and groups whose political ideologies or values I don't agree with or that I find actively oppressive. And the whole thing is an exploration of how can we rediscover our faith in humanity to actually work together towards understanding and compassion. And the deeper message of the book is that this faith begins with ourselves, that we become more able to reach across distance and understand perspectives different from our own when we are in a regular practice of compassion for the self.
Yes, absolutely. I just love how hopeful and thought-provoking this whole book is. I love that anyone, I feel, can pick up this book and just resonate with a poem or a letter or your musings throughout. One I especially gravitated towards, and one of the earlier ones, is to the ones who didn't cry, but also to the compulsive caregivers.
Oh, thank you so much for picking those two out. So for the ones who didn't cry is a letter. I had a very specific Chinese American and to some extent Chinese Canadian community as well. And that's the amazing thing about specificity, I find, is that somehow in writing very specifically, we can also open up a really universal connection to a readership at large. This poem is largely about my own response to the tragic and horrifying shooting deaths of many massage parlor workers in Atlanta in 2021. So this was a series of murders, and there's some debate over whether these murders were racially motivated, whether they were misogynistic, whether it was about whorephobia, the fear and hatred of sex workers. But long story short, a white male gunman entered a series of massage parlors and shot several of the workers and associated people to death, which is it's just so awful. And the moment that I write about in that particular letter that kind of sparked this piece was watching the newscast about the events, where there was this one particular police officer who was describing the shooter, and he said, "Oh, well, this young man, he had a really bad day, and he just..." And I mean, I hadn't cried until that moment, and it was a day later after I knew about the shootings. I'd known about them for about 24 hours, and I saw this newscast, and suddenly I just burst into tears. I couldn't stop crying about it for several days. There was something about that phrase, "he just had a bad day," that made me realize, like, oh my gosh, to a lot of people out there, Asian women, Asian sex workers, massage workers, migrants, we're not human, and our lives don't matter. And there was this sort of massive realization for me in that moment that my experience of a feeling that is echoed by many, many marginalized communities throughout North America and throughout the world. There are so many groups of people who have been treated as though their lives don't matter. And of course, I'm thinking as well about the Black Lives Matter movement and all the many, many senseless deaths that have been the result of systemic racism. So that is the foundation of that poem.
Yes, I felt that. And I am not an Asian woman, I'm a Black woman, but I felt that. So yes, I think it's something all marginalized groups. I think some of us can definitely relate to that. Another one for me was a compulsive caregiver, because I felt that was me. I was that child.
For you, Victoria.
I'm telling you, I felt that one to my core. I appreciated to the death walkers, but also to the Church of Social Justice and to Jesus Christ. I needed that one as well, because I too have fallen in and out with my faith, and just kind of seeing how you wrote with such honesty. I needed to hear this too. I needed to see and feel that I'm not the only one.
I'm so glad. Those two pieces are, of course, paired, like to the Church of Social Justice and to Jesus Christ. And for those who haven't picked up the book yet, a little plug is that in the piece to Jesus Christ, we recast Jesus as sort of like a stoner boyfriend figure, and it's, to me, that's quite fun. And the deeper aspects of those pieces that you're getting at, of course, is that there are these strange parallels sometimes between religion, and I grew up in contact with the fundamentalist religion. My one side of my family is evangelical Christian Chinese, so there's a parallel between that and certain forms of political ideology, and in my case, that would be like leftist social justice ideology. And while in some ways, those two worlds couldn't be further apart, when they're at their worst, that experience of being surveilled by one's neighbors, being gossiped about, being judged, that feeling of if I put one toe over the line and I never know quite where the line will be on any given day, then I'll lose my whole community. I think that's like a punitive impulse that's embedded, in us by, the trauma of oppression and colonization. And there's this grief I feel about why we keep on hurting and exiling one another, and this longing for a different way of being. And maybe that's what you're feeling too. I don't know.
Absolutely. You are spot on. That is kind of the root of my emotion. And it just kind of felt good. Again, just you putting into words, sometimes I know I struggle to find, but also just being seen in some of these stories and these letters and these poems. And I encourage everyone to pick up a copy, because while you might not resonate with the ones I resonated with, I assure you, I feel there's something in here for everyone. And interspersed between these poems as well, you also have some prompts that follow each letter that it tells us, the reader, to either do something, think about something, reflect on something. And in particular, it gives us a chance while reading to also look inward, which I think is incredibly important. So I appreciated these prompts. I mean, this one in particular, I was like, I should do this, which, let me see, it followed to a lost sister. Write a prayer of hope on a piece of paper and leave it somewhere for someone else to find. That was a great action. I love this energy and these prompts that you're giving, because I also think sometimes it's really easy for us, myself included sometimes, to sit and think and wish and hope and feel such despair. But with these actions, it gives us something to channel our energies into and also to help us build a more hopeful future.
Absolutely, absolutely, Victoria. I'm so glad you felt that. For me, these prompts are partly because in the book, because I worked for many years as a psychotherapist, and I can't help but want to assign people homework, But also, for me, I really deeply believe that literature and poetry are capable of creating real change in the world that we live in. But for that to happen, readers and writers both have to take the ideas that we write and read about and put them into practice in our own lives in embodied ways. And so I'm just so happy that you actually did follow through on the prompts. All of them are actual rituals or exercises that I did for myself over the course of the year while I wrote the book. And it's just so exciting to me that people who pick up falling back in love with being human might get to join in that collective experience, not only of reading something, but of working together on transformation and growth.
Yes, absolutely. But I want to know about you, Kai. Tell me what inspired you to put falling back in love with being human together. What was the spark? What were you experiencing or going through at the time?
Oh, yes. Well, it was sort of three crises that all happened to intersect at the same time. So that is to say, I was a hot mess. I was a hot mess personally, professionally, spiritually. And I wrote this book as a way of putting myself back together, really. Those crises were, on a personal level, it was the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think, like everybody else, I was sort of freaking out, experiencing lockdown, questioning my existence and my purpose in life. Professionally, I was also making a shift away from social work and mental health to try and do something that was more systemically oriented, but I didn't know what that was really going to be yet. And then on a political level, actually, the spark of that particular crisis was reading a letter written by J.K. Rowling. It wasn't a letter, actually. It was a statement that she put out on her website, kind of defining her stance on trans rights issues. And as most people know, she has some very controversial views on that topic, which I disagree with, deeply. But what struck me about that letter is that in it, Rowling points to two things. One is her own experience of intimate partner violence. And the second is just this very brief mention of her own experience of, we might call it, gender confusion in adolescence. And she says, had she been born in a later generation, she herself might have chosen to transition. And there was something deeply powerful about that. And also something deeply sad. I sort of wonder, if J.K. Rowling had transitioned, would she be happier now? Potentially, I don't know. I couldn't say really, but there was something there, about the connection I felt really, and the empathy, despite also really truly finding her views abhorrent, and that hasn't changed. But I did feel like a connection through that, and I wanted to write back to it. So I did. I wrote the piece that would become to J.K. Rowling in this book, and then all the other letters just sort of came out one by one after that.
Oh, wow. The fact that you found empathy as well at the same time is incredibly powerful. And I also think it's something especially folks from marginalized communities are intimately familiar with. It's the contradiction of completely disagreeing with a point of view, but also having understanding and empathy. So with that in mind, I guess my question is, how do you find hope? How do you find faith sometimes in human beings, in our society, in our world, when sometimes they don't care for us in the way that they should or we would want them to?
Yes, the eternal paradox, right? That we deeply long to have faith in human beings, but then, the general trend of human behavior is not necessarily deserving of that faith, right? And I will say, I think I'm particularly privileged in this regard, in that, I've done a lot of different types of very intimate work, right? I've been a sex worker, as I mentioned in the book. I've done therapy. I work as a mediator and a coach now, and I've gotten to get a glimpse of people one on one and in groups in very, very charged, powerful moments. And what I will say is, if we are able and willing to choose to stay in conversation and in connection with one another, even in the midst of very serious conflict, then we actually often can and do surprise one another in the commonality of our experience, in our shared need for affirmation and safety and belonging, in our experience simultaneously of like deep shame, like believing that we're bad and evil, and in longing to be good for others. And this is actually what I see in at least some of J.K. Rowling's more recent statements, and other people who I disagree with really fervently. I do actually see the combination of that shame and longing to be good that I think we also feel in the social justice world or on the progressive left, and we have that contradiction in ourselves too, that we long to be good. That's why we do social justice stuff, and also we're full of shame sometimes, and I think that's why we're so hard on one another in the social justice world. So if we were to come back to this question of how we have faith as marginalized communities or communities of color, we have empathy for the oppressor, but the oppressor is not reciprocating that empathy. Well, first I'll say, I think it's important to liberate ourselves from the compulsion to forgive our oppressor. I don't think it's useful to say, oh, well, just be enlightened and turn the other cheek. That to me that feels kind of toxic and not very good. But where we can find like a deeper and more resonant faith, I think, is in refusing to allow the actions of the oppressor to turn us into their mirror image. So, we have righteous anger, of course, at the trauma that's been inflicted upon us by injustice. But I think despite the unfairness of that, we do each have the responsibility and the potential to transform that trauma into compassion first for ourselves, and then into compassionate works out in the world, supporting our own communities and inviting like a different way of responding to conflict and ending violence. So I don't know if that's like too nebulous, but really what I think it is on a day-to-day for me is, all the time, right? Like I witness racism and transphobia and ableism and all these terrible things. And I am so angry about it. But I just know that what I refuse is to allow is for the hatred that's out there to turn me into a hateful person. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense, which also just perfectly leads into my next question, which is I wanted you to, if you would be so kind, to share more about Arise embodiment. I think what I loved was when I landed first on a page, it had, so you're ready to choose love. And I hope more people will choose love, both either after listening to this podcast, picking up the book, but also maybe they want more from you. So tell us about Arise embodiment and the work you're doing there.
Oh, Oh, thank you for checking out my business website. That's so cool. So Arise Embodiment is the name of my sole proprietorship. I work in consultancy, mostly in the community sector, nonprofit sector, and in higher education, but I would be happy to explore other areas as well. So I work as a conflict resolution mediator, transformative dialogue facilitator, and one-on-one transformational coach. So the idea here is that I bring a lot of different tools for having powerful conversations that are intended to support people and groups to shift patterns that they're finding are keeping them restricted from embodying the values that they want to live out there in the world. So that might be, for example, on one basis, I work with a lot of leaders and managers of change-focused organizations who want to expand their capacity to lead their teams and their organizations through difficult moments. I facilitate dialogue with organizations and groups that want to work through, say, difficult conversations about racial justice or trans inclusivity, and on a education or policy based level, I do a lot of teaching about transformative justice and restorative justice. So these are ways of looking at conflict and violence that aim to respond to those issues, not by increasing punishments or propping up the criminal justice and carceral systems, but by finding ways to transform the social conditions that lead to harm in the first place.
So if there's anyone listening who works for an organization, a company, a nonprofit, just anything that you think you could benefit from Kai's services, go to ariseembodiment.org. You can find more information there. But getting back to the book and getting back to reading, I'm really curious about your reading life, Kai. So tell me about the last book that you finished reading that you'd now recommend.
Oh, I always struggle when I'm asked for book recommendations because I'm always reading many books at once and I love them all. But I will say the standout for me right now is another trans woman author. Her name is Rika Aoki, and she has been writing and teaching for many, many years, actually. Her latest novel is The Light from Many Stars. And it is a fantastic book for any reader, I think, who is interested in these ideas about love, changing ourselves for the better. It is actually a story about a violin teacher who sells her students' souls to the devil, but then she sort of goes on a journey about that through the novel. And I will say about Rika is that she has the most incredible way of addressing very, very deep, sometimes intense topics with the most beautiful lightness, joy, and optimism. Like for anyone who is looking for a read that addresses serious topics while also, being incredibly joyful and life-giving, I would say definitely check out this book.
Yes, it's a fabulous book. I've read it myself and I couldn't agree with you more. I remember the prompt that followed the J.K. Rowling letter. It was go back and read a book you love from childhood and, kind of see what you think. So my question is, tell me about a childhood favorite that maybe you revisited lately or just a favorite that you remember.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is the best question ever, I have to say, because I adore children's lit, and I'm imagining that perhaps like yourself, I was a voracious reader as a kid. Yeah, I had a feeling. So books, the first series of books that changed my life were the Song of the Lioness fantasy quartet by Tamara Pierce, who is a long-standing feminist fantasy author for children and adolescents. She has a very tight-knit, very fervent fan community. So this series of books is about a 10-year-old girl in a fantasy world who decides to disguise herself as a boy so that she'll be allowed to train as a knight and go off on adventures and change the world and stuff like that. And, this book was absolutely incredible. It wasn't actually explicitly trans, but you can see how there are some gender bending themes in there that I found really fascinating as like a young queer, soon to be trans kid, So I really, really loved those books. They also were really full of feminist ideas and like progressive ideas that went on to shape a lot of my life and my perspective. I go back and reread those books, once every 4 or 5 years. And I did that recently, just last year, wondering if they would hold up. And I'm happy to say, for the most part, they really do. Now, this quartet was written in the 80s, and Tamara Pierce has continued writing right up until now. So, her writing has become more and more contemporary. And those books in the 80s, you can see that they were written in the 80s. So they're particularly the third book in the series has a fair amount of like white saviorism in it. There's this kind of plot line where Alana, who is white, goes into the desert and teaches the value of like female empowerment to some people of color, and it's very kind of cringe. But other than that, I am happy to say, most of those books really, really does hold up, and there's this interesting experience as well of having to hold the contradiction, right? Like now that I'm an adult living in 2023, I can see what's problematic about them, but I do still love those books and what they did for me and a lot of other kids out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So my last reading and bookish question is, what books are you looking forward to now reading in the year ahead?
Ooh. Yes. So I have a long list, but the highlights are one of my favorite trans authors, Casey Plett, has a book coming out next year called On Community, I believe. It's a nonfiction book about many of the. Well, I'm not quite sure, but based on the description, it sounds like it'll address some of the themes in that poem, From Falling Back in Love with Being Human to the Church of Social Justice, and probably a lot of other themes around community as well. And I just think Casey is such a brilliant thinker that I'm really excited to get her take on some of these things. I am also really looking forward to You Could Make This Place Beautiful. It's a memoir by the poet Maggie Smith, which I'm hearing has gotten fantastic reviews already. I'm really excited by creative nonfiction this year, I think. And then a book that's been out there for a while, but that I haven't had a chance to read yet, that I keep on meaning to, is Feminist Accountability by Anne Russo. So this is a more of like an intellectual or academic work that is about reconceptualizing the idea of accountability and justice in situations of community or intimate harm. And I mean, yeah, it's work related, but I'm always like eager to devour work on these kinds of topics. Oh, and then I will say more in the zone of like fun reading. Fonda Lee, yes, a novella called Untethered Sky, which is about a young woman who dedicates her life to training gigantic birds, like birds of prey the size of like an elephant. I mean, who hasn't wanted to train a gigantic bird the size of an elephant, So yeah, these are some reads that I'm particularly looking forward to.
Oh, amazing. I love it. All right, so let's get back to your book, Falling Back in Love with Being Human. Now the book is available, readers can get their hands on a copy, but in an ideal world, what are you hoping readers might think or feel after they've turned the last page?
Really, my deepest hope is that readers will finish the book and feel an expanded capacity to love themselves more deeply, that they might close the book and actually have this feeling of, okay, maybe I've done some things or felt some things that I'm not proud of, and I can still love myself despite that. I'm not alone in having doubts, feeling conflicted, being down on myself. And also through that, then think, okay, maybe it's possible to connect with other people that maybe I had imagined it would be impossible to connect with, whether that's like an estranged family member or like a friend who's gone in a really different political direction. I have a lot of those in my life. That we just might feel like a greater softness towards ourselves and towards other people. I guess what I'm saying is I would like readers to leave the book feeling empowered to connect to other human beings on this planet.
And more than anything, I hope they will have hope, because the book gave me hope. Thank you so much, Kai, for coming on the show and speaking with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.